All right, we're live, and we are welcome to Baxter County Roundtable. This, I believe, is episode 35, and tonight we have a special guest, and his name is Christian Olson. He's running for land commissioner as a Republican. But before we do that, before we get into that, we have some advertisers that we're going to announce, and I'll let Russ take care of that.
Yeah, first off, I'd like to say that Baxter County Roundtable is sponsored. Our primary sponsor is the Republican Committee here of Baxter County. We also are sponsored by the folks up at Mountain Home Heat and Air up on Highway 5 North. Voted the best in the Twin Lakes area for both 2024 and 2025. They're the largest Goodman dealer in the Twin Lakes area. Mountain Home Heat and Air together with Goodman are two names you can trust. Goodman's made in the United States, right outside of Houston, Texas. They're made by Americans for Americans. They also specialize in DULC and mini split systems. I see those mini splits everywhere I go nowadays, man.
I'm seeing them more and more for sure.
From new installations to duct cleaning and everything in between, Mountain Home Heat and Air are the people you call for all your heating, ventilation, and air conditioning needs. They offer high-quality systems and workmanship, affordable pricing. Financing is available. So give Kurt Lawrence and the folks up at Mountain Home Heat and Air a call at 870-425-HVAC. That's 870-425-4822.
And they're some of their products, if not all, are made in good old USA.
Yes, sir.
As I understand it.
And they're really good people up there too, I'll tell you.
So I support Made in the USA. Okay, thank you, Russell. Welcome, Christian Olson. I have no idea what a land commissioner does. It's probably not the most well known. So first of all, if you introduce yourself, tell us a little about you, and then we'll get into the land commissioner stuff.
All right, can you hear me okay?
We
Yeah,
can hear you.
hear you
All
great.
right. So my name is Christian Olson, and I am from Little Rock, but like I say, I try not to act like it. I don't think Little Rock needs to decide everything for everybody all across the state all the time. So I grew up here in Little Rock. I was homeschooled, went to school at UCA, got a degree in political science, and before college worked on some campaigns and fell in love with the political process and just the excitement of campaigns and being involved. And now we homeschool our two kids. I'm married to Melissa, and we've got two boys, a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. And so I've worked in the land commissioner's office. I've worked for some other state agencies and have really enjoyed the last 20,000 miles across the state campaigning.
All right, well, welcome. I'm going to be perfectly
Glad
honest
to
with
be
you.
here.
I have no clue what a land commissioner does, so let's start there.
Well,
But I'm not alone.
I like to say, no, you're not alone. I used to ask as I traveled across the state who knew what the land commissioner's office did, and I'd always be surprised if there was more than one hand in a crowd of 20 or 30 people. But I started to realize, and I started to say that not knowing what the land commissioner does is a good thing. That's a lot like not knowing who your local prosecutor is. That means that you've been staying out of trouble, because 90% of what the office does is the sale of tax delinquent property. So, and specifically real estate. So if you don't pay your real estate taxes for about 2 years, the county collector will send you kind of nasty mail saying you need to pay your real estate taxes. At the end of those 2 years, the county collector will send it to the state, specifically the state land commissioner. And the land commissioner will take over sending you nasty mail for about 2 years telling you to pay your real estate taxes. And at the end of those 2 years, if the taxes are unpaid, the land commissioner is the one who puts that property up for public auction. It goes to sale. And the taxes collected go back to the county. So really, it's the collection agency on behalf of the counties, but it's not on personal property, it's just the real estate taxes.
So
That's
so it's unusual probably, but it's can happen where a citizen could overlook the taxes due. So, but there's sounds like there's ample opportunity, ample notice given for the citizen to correct that problem.
That's right. Usually, if there's just an oversight, by the time the county collector starts talking, starts sending out mail or puts the name in the paper of the unpaid taxes. In fact, I think just recently we had some names in the newspaper. That's usually enough where your neighbors or family members will call and say, "Hey, your name was in the paper. It's you forgot to pay your taxes," and it solves the problem fairly quickly. Where the problem really gets to be more complicated is if somebody passes away and the folks that inherit the property never change the name on the title. And at some point, the tax bills just aren't getting to where they're supposed to go. And so what that means is when the tax bills don't get to where they're supposed to go, it means that the delinquent notices also don't get to where they should be going. But it's not really the county's fault. Whoever owns the property has the responsibility of notifying the county who the current owner is. So a lot of the time, that's how things fall through the cracks. Or alternatively, most people, if they have a mortgage on their home, the taxes are part of their interest and principal and insurance payments, right? They roll it all into one payment, so your monthly payment stays the same. Well, eventually that mortgage gets paid off, and you've spent 30 years not paying the real estate taxes, and so you don't think about it. But now that the house is paid off, now it's officially yours. But now you have to remember to pay those taxes. And so really, the important part of this job is making sure everybody's treated fairly, that the process is fair, that the process is followed, right? That's part of how you protect the property owners, making sure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed, that everybody's treated the same. But at the same time, that revenue does have to be collected for the counties, because counties, by and large in Arkansas, rely on the real estate taxes as their primary source of revenue for roads, for especially public schools. 80% of your real estate taxes go into the public school fund. The rest is spent on public safety and roads. So your county jail, your sheriff's office, and all those roads that you wish were paved perfectly, but usually aren't. And that's partly because there's never quite enough money to go around. But
Well,
it's an important job.
You mentioned process. What if by the time the land commissioner gets a hold of the property, and what is the process? Where does it go from there once you get a hold of it? If it
Once
hasn't
the
been
land
paid?
commission, so every year, the county collectors certify a new batch of delinquent taxes that are now newly 2 years delinquent, right? So it's on a rolling basis. Every year, you get a new batch. As soon as the land commissioner's office gets those and enters them into the system, there is staff dedicated to trying to find anybody associated with those properties. So if you're the current owner of record, you should be getting a tax bill. But if you're a lien holder, you should also be getting the tax bill. So if you don't pay your taxes, you can opt out of having the bank pay your taxes out of your mortgage payment. But if you do that, the bank will get a notice as a lien holder that the taxes are due, and if the taxes aren't satisfied, the property will be put up for sale. And so, at that point, if there's no mortgage on the property, the land commissioner will start reaching out to the second degree people with contacts to the property. Like if we can find that the property owner, this seems to be that Jim, Frank, and Ted are all children of the property owner, the land commissioner's office can start sending notifications to them, just anybody that's associated with the property, and try to get those taxes paid. Because really, this has been true in the past, and I think it needs to be true if I get elected, that selling the land really is a matter of last resort. The first goal is just to get those taxes settled. But selling the property at auction really needs to be a matter of last resort. But if all attempts to notice somebody with an interest in the property fail, then the land does go to sale at public auction. For most of our 75 counties, that means the land commissioner's office will actually physically go into that county to hold their auction. If there are some smaller counties that don't have a whole lot of parcels on their own, the land commissioner's office can combine those and do one auction and cover maybe 3 counties at the same time. But if the taxes aren't paid and the property goes to auction, when the starting bid has to include the owed taxes, the interest, the fees, and the penalties. So that would be the starting bid. If the property doesn't sell at that public auction, it goes on the post-auction sales list, which basically means that it goes onto a catalog online. And the Land Commissioner's website in the last few years has become very user-friendly. So if you want to look at tax delinquent properties that are available for purchase, you can go to cosl.org. That's COSL.org or commissionerstatelands.org. And you can actually map out where the parcels are available. And it'll list the liens that have been uncovered in the process. And you do become responsible for those liens if you are successful at winning the property. But if the property still doesn't sell, even after it's added online, after a period of time, the land commissioner can accept just the taxes owed and eventually any reasonable offer. So the bar required in order to purchase the property falls over time. And so one of the reasons why this is an important process is because sometimes you can have a property owner pass away with no heir, and there's no probate, and the property just sits there. Well, this delinquent tax process allows that property to get back into ownership of somebody. So we talk about real estate taxes, and a lot of people think that's probably a very unfair tax. And you know what? I tend to agree. If you own something, to have to pay taxes on it on a regular basis, it really doesn't seem fair. I'm going to cough just a minute.
So basically, one of your main responsibilities is to take these parcels or whatever and get rid of them. There's no advantage to the state to let them pile up and just accumulate value or whatever.
That's right.
Is that right?
That's right. There's no value to that. In fact, I would argue there's no value to the state to sell them. The best value to the state is to find somebody who's willing to pay the taxes on them and get them off the books.
Gotcha.
It's important to note that paying those taxes does not change ownership. You have to actually go through the auction process in order for that ownership to change.
And is that these auctions, does that generally take place on the courthouse square of the county where the property is or how does that
It can
work?
be in a hotel. It can be, it could be at a library. It could be at a community center. It can be anywhere that can accommodate the size crowd that you might expect to see for that number of parcels.
But I guess I've seen auctions posted at the county courthouse. Maybe that's what I'm.
Yeah. I think some are at the county courthouse. So if you win the bid, if you are the most successful bidder, the land commissioner will issue a limited warranty deed. And that limited warranty deed allows you to claim ownership of the property, but you do need to go through the quiet title process in order to get a full warranty deed. And so that's just an important thing to keep in mind. And so when I worked there, you had a redemption period after the auction where the owner could still come back up to 90 days after the sale and cancel the sale, and the buyer would get their money back. That's no longer the case. Now you have up until the evening before. I think it's something like 4:59 the evening prior to the auction in order to cancel the sale or prevent the property from going to sale. So that does make it easier to purchase these properties without worrying about the property owner finally coming out and paying the taxes. However, they did make it easier to pay the taxes because it used to be that you had to have a ownership interest in the property in order to pay the taxes to prevent the sale, but now anybody can pay the taxes. It doesn't change ownership, like I said, but it does prevent the sale as long as those taxes are paid. So I've been running my campaign as the most Republican, the most conservative, and the most qualified. And obviously, the reason why I consider myself the most qualified is because I've worked in the office. So that does mean I do have an understanding of the office and how important this role is.
You have
But
worked
because-
you have worked in the land commissioner's office.
That's right. I was there for about 2 years under John Thurston.
Okay.
which is why I feel like I have a pretty good handle on the job. But one of the things that I do like to talk about is that this is really a support organization for your local government. I don't like paying my federal taxes. I do it because I'm a good Christian and I don't want to go to jail. But I don't really trust the federal government to spend my money better than I can. The state government does a much better job spending our tax dollars. And so I don't like paying my income taxes to the state, but at least I have a better sense of what they're doing with it, right? And I have a better sense of input, right? It's so much easier to get a hold of my state representative or my state legislator, state senator, or even just hang out at the Capitol and you can catch legislators. It's fairly easy. But it's really your local government that you, as a voter, have the most input on, right? They are the most accessible. They are the most accountable, ideally, right? And so if you have to pay taxes, and I wish we didn't, but if you have to, it's your local government that I think is most deserving of those dollars. That's where the real rubber of government meets the road, right? Every time you hit a pothole, you know exactly what name comes to mind that you wish they would just put a little more asphalt over here or a little more asphalt over there.
True conservative principles, really.
That that's exactly what I argue, is that this is a great job for somebody who supports local government. This is a great job for somebody who really wants to make sure that Little Rock is not deciding everything. The challenges that each county faces is very unique to that county. I've been to counties where they get most of their budget from the U.S. Forest Service because they're surrounded by national forest. So they have, I think Scott County said he had 1,100. The county judge in Scott County said he had 1,100 miles of dirt road he maintains, and he gets paid by the Forest Service to do it. And that's a huge part of what his job is. And then in Prairie County, they don't actually use real estate taxes to pay for their jail. They have other sources to pay for that. And so it's really interesting. I was in Searcy County, and one of the gentlemen running for county judge there said, you can't buy a pair of shoes in all of Searcy County. And I find that really interesting that there are counties in Arkansas where you can't buy a pair of shoes. And it's not because they wanted to and can't, it's that they didn't want the Walmart. And so I support their ability to say what they want in their county and what they don't want in their county. If a county wants to, if they think they can get rid of the real estate tax in their county and don't have to rely on those funds, I think they should be able to get away from that. If they think that they have to have those, I'm not going to force them to get rid of it. Not that I'd be in a position to do it anyway, but I think this is a wonderful position to advocate for counties being able to govern themselves. I think our founding fathers said that the government that governs least governs best. And I think that the government that is closest to the people also governs best.
I couldn't agree more. I'm totally on board with that.
Yep.
Is there anything
Same here.
you have to?
Well, I got a couple of questions. I kind of wanted to do a little bit of research because, to be honest, I didn't know what Commissioner of State Lands did either. I've met you a few times, talked to you and stuff, and still didn't know what the commissioner. So I went on the website. It looks like you're also responsible for mineral leasing on state lands.
That's right.
Okay,
Now,
so
so
from that standpoint, with the lithium and all this other stuff, that's could potentially be a huge new responsibility, right?
yeah, so in theory, yes. Now, my understanding is when it talks about mineral rights, primarily what we're talking about is the sand and gravel mineral rights on the navigable waterways. So
Okay.
the navigable waterways are run by the Corps of Engineers, right? And when I worked in the Land Commissioner's office, I actually did policy on the Arkansas River and the 12-foot channel that they wanted. And so we dealt with the Corps of Engineers, and that's really a black hole of bureaucracy right there. Like, I have never felt the urge to bang my head against the wall as much as realizing that they answered exactly what we asked, but never answered what they knew we were trying to ask. Right? It was an amazing feat to dodge our questions while answering exactly what we were asking. It took a while to figure out what the right questions were to ask in order to get the answers to our questions. And part of that is just the learning process, right? But even though the Corps of Engineers runs the navigable waterways, the state actually owns the dirt underneath. And so one of the things I think that, that's a submerged land, right? And so one of the things I think is interesting is that as the river twists and turns and as silt builds up and as things start growing, sometimes you get new land that literally wasn't there before. But you get additional lands that kind of washed up and accumulated over time. That's an emerged land. And the title for that originates in the Land Commissioner's office. So all along the rivers where the sand and gravel mining operations happen, those are on essentially state land, right? They're on the riverbanks of the navigable waterways. And so the Land Commissioner's office does oversee those leases. So now when you start talking about the lithium, it's the Oil and Gas Commission that actually has oversight of those leases. I suppose if there is state land where they are harvesting lithium, then that would be a legitimate place for the Land Commissioner's office to say, hey, we've got some oversight here. Now, how much lithium will be extracted from state land, I wouldn't be able to tell you. But when you think about the ownership of state land, the vast majority of it is going to be owned by the Highway Department, where the roads are, by the Parks Department, where we've got our state parks. Well, there's not going to be a whole lot of extraction from that. Mm-hmm. And then Game and Fish. And there probably won't be a whole lot of extraction from that. Now, there could be, and obviously we want to do a good job if there is. But for the most part, I don't really see this being a great source of revenue. Arkansas is not like Texas. The Texas Land Commissioner has lots of land, lots of oil and gas leases, and oversees a lot of money from it. In fact, that's how they pay for a lot of their state retirement system, their education system. A lot of that comes through the Land Commissioner in Texas. I do understand that things could have changed in the more than a decade since I've worked in the Land Commissioner's office. So I would be pretty interested to see what kind of possibilities there are for exploring the minerals on state land. But the way that I understand some of this works is that the Land Commissioner himself will sit as chair of the Natural Resources Commission. And the Natural Resources Commission does oversee some of this. So the example that Tommy Land gave me when we sat and visited some time ago is if the Forestry Commission wants to harvest timber on state-owned land, right? If we want healthy forests, sometimes you need to harvest that timber. And so the Forestry Commission will go to the Natural Resources Commission and ask for permission to get some bids. If the Natural Resources Commission approves it, then the Forestry Commission can go out and get some bids. And then after the bid is selected and it's approved, they harvest the timber. And then the proceeds actually goes to the Land Commissioner's office as a pass-through agency before going to the Forestry Commission. So there are natural resources like timber that can be harvested on state land. I really would be interested to see what can be made of the lithium, because it seems like the possibilities could be very, very interesting. But historically, the Land Commissioner's office really hasn't had a whole lot to do with energy. When you're talking about mineral rights, it really is going to be mostly the sand and gravel.
Okay.
How about, I've heard recently, not too distant past anyway, discussions about China owning real estate in Arkansas. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the first thing is, foreign investment in Arkansas is generally historically been considered a good thing, right? We like it when companies, even if they're owned, by Canada or the Netherlands or the UK, people we're friendly with anyway, them investing and creating jobs in Arkansas has been, a good thing. However, China and other actors seem to be acting more and more aggressively, and there has been more and more cause for concern. And on the campaign trail, I've heard a lot of people ask the question and talk about, especially in very specific communities that might have private dues associated with those parcels. It's not too hard to snap up a bunch of parcels at a reasonable amount, uh, especially if there aren't any other liens on them. So this is a genuine concern a lot of people have. And so I talked to a friend of mine that works in the Attorney General's office, and we walked through that right now the ownership of land is regulated at the state level and the federal level. And there's a federal regulation called ITAR that really works through what kind of trade relationships you can have with different countries. So I think there's about 17 different countries on there, and it ranges from North Korea to Belarus. And China's on there, and of course Cuba's on there. For countries like Cuba, we have a total embargo, right? Or near total embargo. We just don't trade with them. We don't sell them stuff. We don't buy their stuff. And then you have China, where we will buy some of their things and they will buy some of our things. But there are, and should be, some kind of guidelines, right? There are certain things we won't trade with them. Then you have countries like Iran, where like we will sell them some things, but we will not sell them anything that can explode, right?
Right.
You just don't do that. So the real question comes down to, I've heard our Attorney General talk a lot about gray warfare, right? Where you can negatively affect a country without actually going to war. And that is really where I think a lot of the concern about the ownership of land is. It's not that they're going to blow anything up as much as they'll have access in order to do things. And so the short answer is I don't think that any land going through the land commissioner's office needs to be sold to anybody who wants to do us harm, right? Whether it's China or whether it's anybody else. You don't want the government to facilitate any kind of harm to Arkansas or her citizens. And so on one hand, I know the easy thing that politicians have done in the past is you just give them a form, right? And then have a little affidavit. I swear that I am not a bad guy. And you sign your name and you give that. And then I, as the government, can go around and say, look, we didn't sell any land to any bad guys. We have a whole list of affidavits saying that nobody is a bad guy. So I could do that, but it wouldn't mean anything, right? And when I worked at the land commissioner at the state securities department, I was deputy securities commissioner, regulated investment advisors and broker dealers. And cybersecurity was a huge deal, right? Because we regulated folks that deal with your money and with the money of lots of other people. And cybersecurity is one of those things where a lot of bad actors are really looking for opportunities. They're looking for the easy path, the path of least resistance. And so sometimes if you just put up some roadblocks, it might not be perfect, but sometimes just putting up roadblocks and putting up some hoops is enough to really discourage bad actors from even targeting Arkansas. If they could go somewhere else, that'd be, I don't want them to go to any state in Arkansas, in any state in America, but particularly I don't want them to be messing with Arkansas. So sometimes just asking the right questions is the important thing. And so what I'm recommending and what I've been campaigning on is I think that the Land Commissioner's Office should have the same authority as the Arkansas Agriculture Department. So right now, if the Arkansas Agriculture Department suspects there being a bad actor trying to take advantage of Arkansas's farmland, they can request the Attorney General to do an investigation. Now, the Land Commissioner's Office doesn't have that authority. And so I think that the Land Commissioner's Office should get that same authority. So if there's a suspected problem, there's a red flag of any kind, we can request the Attorney General to investigate and do a deeper dive. So you want to have a balance too between making sure that the Land Commissioner's Office can get a good high price for the properties that are being sold, but you also have to balance that with making sure that we're not just selling properties willy-nilly to bad actors that have a lot of money to burn, right?
And so we know that they want to hurt us.
That's right. That's right.
Well,
There's no
and-
doubt about their intentions. It's about limiting their opportunities.
Well, and the other thing is, with China specifically, there's been multiple incidents of them being caught here in Arkansas trying to steal crop technology, and people
That's
say,
right.
well, crops, I mean, it's like, well, yeah, there's a whole lot of research goes on in the state of Arkansas
Yes, there is.
for rice especially, but there's been multiple incidents where they were caught stealing our technology.
That's right.
You know, we're not quite as bad off as California, or some of the other states where they've got numerous military installations. And China has purchased thousands of acres all around surrounding those military installations, which is absolutely a national security emergency, because they could start, interfering with communications and electronic, uh, uh,
Well,
EMI and a whole bunch of stuff. But
sure. Well, just think about
they
it.
could also do the same thing with crops. I mean, it wouldn't be real hard to introduce some kind of a bad pathogen onto some rice fields or some soybean fields, and the next thing you know, Arkansas is, inundated with this pathogen that's almost impossible to get rid of. So,
Sure.
I mean, my feeling is China ought not to be able to buy, a square inch of soil here in Arkansas.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that we should, at the very least, not facilitate the ownership of hostile actors in buying any Arkansas land. But I do think that in order to, it's kind of like a fence around the property. If it's not complete, it doesn't do much, right? And so, in order to make that fence go all the way around the property, it really needs to be a partnership between the state and the federal government, right? I think you do have an issue where you can have um, you can have somebody with a perfectly Arkansan sounding name with an LLC, right? And they'd be the agent. But behind the LLC would be somebody that does have nefarious purposes. And so right now, it's not super easy to be able to pull back the layers and say, well, um, this is an okay person who lives locally, and this is somebody who wants to do us harm. I don't think we have very good tools for that, honestly. And
Yeah, they've
I think the tools that we have on the state are not as effective as they could be too, right? Like some of those investigations that the Arkansas Agriculture Department did do, it turned out that the folks that they were interested in were actually from Taiwan. And so we do have to be careful, right, that we don't use any tools that were given in order to cause harm to innocent people. But at the same time, protecting life, liberty, and property is the main purpose of government.
That's right.
And I mean that in terms of the land commissioner selling property, that has to be a high bar to sell. But that protecting life, right? Protecting life, liberty, and property also means protecting from foreign folks that want to do us harm, right? I guess it's enemies, foreign and domestic, is what the Constitution refers to, right? And so finding that balance is really there's not an easy answer. And I'm afraid that each time we talk about this, I feel like my answer is the most realistic and most accurate, but it's also the least satisfactory, right? Just because there's a lot of loose ends. But I think that's the reality. I think the reality is, in order to get something that protects us and our land, it really is going to have to be an ongoing conversation, an ongoing process. It's kind of like airport security, right? We can look and what we see doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us. But if they weren't doing anything at all, that would make us pretty nervous. But doing something allows the process to be refined over time, where theoretically it can get better and better and better and make improvements. But you have to have leadership that wants to take it in that direction, right? That accurately sees the problem and then, on an ongoing basis tries to pinpoint the problem even better.
Yeah, there was an instance down just outside of Jonesboro down in Bay, I don't know, a couple, 3 years ago, where they found it was a Chinese company that was behind an LLC down there. So, and they were forced to liquidate that to sell it.
Am I? So there was a regulation on the beneficial ownership, and there was some pushback on that, and this was a federal issue, but it really aimed at making more public and more accessible who the ultimate beneficiary was of a company, right? Who the ultimate owner was. And I was talking to somebody about that, and they said the banks already use that. Like, it doesn't have to be open to everybody, but banks currently use it because of the anti-money laundering, right?
Yep,
And
absolutely.
so I figure if banks have access to that in order to prevent hostile actors and money laundering, that seems to be a pretty reasonable tool for the state government to have as well, just to make sure that we aren't selling property to an entity that ultimately means to do us harm. So I think that's one way that we could approach that.
The cases here in Arkansas that I've heard of, that most people are hearing about, the Chinese buying up, I guess they're buying land. I don't know if I have all the information, but is that a function or a malfunction of the land commissioner's office, or someplace else?
So the land commissioner doesn't have any authority to tell you as an individual who you can and cannot sell your land to. We just don't have any authority on that at all. We don't have any real authority on how the state uses land in just about any case. We really only we only really have authority on the sale of tax delinquent property. Once the county, in fact, we don't even really have a whole lot of authority if the county collector or county assessor gets something wrong. We have to go off of what the county collector says. And so we really are bound by that tax delinquent process. Now, under the law, the land commissioner's office is nominally supposed to be the repository for all the deeds and titles of all the state-owned land. So theoretically, like in theory, in a beautiful, perfect world where everything works the way it should, and we didn't have to be conservatives, the land commissioner would have a directory or a encyclopedia of all the state-owned land. We'd be able to say, we own this acre, we own this acre, we own that acre, we own these acres. We have legal descriptions, titles, and have all of it. Unfortunately, reality is much, much messier than that, and we are fallible human beings. And over time, I don't think anybody could give you a comprehensive list with any accuracy of what the state actually owned, because this was a problem when I worked there, and I think this is still a problem. And part of that is because executive agencies answer to the governor, not the land commissioner. Game and Fish answer to, well, we're not sure who Game and Fish answers to. The same thing is fairly true to the highway department, right? And higher education. Each of those are constitutionally separate from the executive agencies under the governor. So the governor doesn't really have direct authority over any of those agencies. And so you really do have to kind of rely on goodwill over time in order to get the cooperation that would be required in order for the land commissioner to eventually put together a comprehensive list of the property owned by the state. In fact, when I worked at the agriculture department, if I remember correctly, the agriculture department itself rented its office building from the Arkansas Building Authority. However, the plant board underneath the Arkansas Agriculture Department did own their own building. But it wasn't even used by the regular plant board. It was used by the Bureau of Standards, of which I was director for a few months. And so the agriculture department didn't really own land, but within the agriculture department, the plant board did. But they didn't use it. It was actually occupied by the Bureau of Standards, which was a division of the plant board. Does that make sense?
Oh man,
Hey, it's government.
you kind of
It's not
lost me there.
It is. Well, it is government, and it is confusing. government is the only place I know of where you can raise a budget and cut a budget at the same time, depending on the context of budget.
Yeah.
Is the proposal an increase over last year? And now are you cutting that proposal? Because if you are, you can increase and decrease a budget at the same time,
Right.
which again, it's government. So it's frustrating. But
Or
because
cut-
government is frustrating, that's one of the reasons why one of the things I'm running on is customer service. When people walk into the land commissioner's office, they don't want to be there. Nobody wants to be there. They're there because they have to pay their taxes or we're threatening to sell their land, right? And that's a key place for customer service to play a role, right? People walk in kind of unfamiliar with the process. And if you're unfamiliar with the process and they're threatening to take your land and sell it, it's pretty understandable if people walk in a little confused, a little angry, a little agitated. They don't want to be there. But it was drilled into my head how important it is to be kind, to be patient, to explain. So when people would come in, we'd sit them down at my desk and have them fill out their name and their address, show them exactly where to put the information. I would look up the parcel number because nobody walks around with parcel numbers in their head, and just walk them through the process and try to make it painless, because government processes and the bureaucracy can be confusing. They can be extremely irritating. They can be illogical, right? They can make less sense than we think they should. But ultimately, having staff that recognize the importance of just making this painless, just make it easy on them. And you go into a government building, and sometimes you're like, well, I have to budget 2 hours of my time, and I'm going to be frustrated the whole time. But you're out in 15 minutes because the person on the other side of the desk is helpful. That's how it's supposed to work. That's how I want my office to run if I get elected to this position. I think Tommy Land has done a great job as land commissioner. I think John Thurston has done a great job as land commissioner. But that focus on customer service is the result of leadership. And I really want to continue that focus on leadership should I get elected.
That
Let's just
sounds
make it
good.
better for people.
That sounds good. We
Christian,
need,
we're getting close to the end of this. So before I let it get past me, I want you to give your contact information.
Sure.
So
Votechristian.com is my website. Vote Christian. It's super easy to remember. My email address is christian@votechristian.com. Be happy to answer any questions I can or help out. And in closing, I do want to mention that we do have this is a Republican primary. I do have an opponent, but I've been working on
who's your
Republican.
opponent?
Say what?
Who is your opponent?
That's a great question. But I've been working on, just kidding. Cole Jester, the Secretary of State, is my
Okay.
opponent. And, they say in politics, you shouldn't mention your opponent's name. But when I'm asked, I always, I got in trouble once for dodging the question too much. And so I
I'm
try to
sorry
be
about
upfront.
that.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I mean,
That was for my personal information.
no, of course. And I really do want to err on the side of being transparent, right? I think people really appreciate it. We made a minor mistake early on where the disclaimer on an email that said paid for by Vote Christian didn't go out. The rest of it, we had proofread, and then it had gone back to default settings. And so we sent another email out just saying, hey, we made a little mistake. Here's the disclaimer that should have been on the email that you just received. Because I do think that it's really important to build trust, and building trust means that you are as open as you can be and as transparent as you can be, and that you answer that you answer the questions that you're asked.
Well, and if you have a good message in the end, you're going to win. That's the way I feel.
Well, that's the thing. I think
But you don't have to help the other guy. I understand that too.
Well, I do think, I've gone more than 20,000 miles on this campaign, traveling the state, just telling people who I am and my background. My wife and I got engaged at the Republican National Convention after we had our first date at a Republican Lincoln Day dinner back in 2012. And so I was homeschooled. We homeschool our boys. So I've worked on Republican campaigns for 26 years. I started 26 years ago as a 14-year-old. So I turned 40 last July. And it's been a lot of fun. So I'm happy to talk about how Republican I am. I'm happy to talk about how conservative I am. And I'm happy to talk about how qualified I am for this position. I think this is a fantastic job for with the state and a fantastic way to be able to serve. And one of the reasons why is because it's a lot of fun to explain to people how important this office is for the counties, and run a very county focused race and spend time just supporting our local government.
Awesome. You
That's
have
good.
anything else?
No, that's good. Christian, you've been very informative tonight, man. I really appreciate it. I'm glad we could finally hook up and get
Same
you
here.
on here. Don't know what our viewership is tonight, but I assure you that over the next 7 to 10 days, people will continue to watch it. That's the way we found that they really like the podcast because they can watch it at their leisure.
Yeah.
They don't have to watch it all at one time. They can piecemeal it, throughout the week. But we're certainly glad that you were able to get on with us tonight. Appreciate it.
Well, I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity just to visit with y'all. I've had a blast. Early voting starts tomorrow, so the timing is perfect. I can't wait to go vote for myself tomorrow. I've never voted for myself in my life, but I get to tomorrow.
Well,
Well,
So
good deal.
Christian,
thank
it
you
was
so
great.
much.
It was great having you. And I think I've met you before, but
Yeah,
I
he was
can't-
at the Meet the Candidates dinner.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yeah, he was up here for that.
Okay. I couldn't put my finger on it. But anyway, thanks for coming and good luck.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much. Bye.
I think we're about to close it out here. We have a few announcements to make, except I don't have the list.
Yeah, well, the quorum court is the first Tuesday of the month, so that's already over with. School board is the third Thursday, I believe it is. So I'm not sure if that's this week or last week.
I apologize. I don't have the list.
But
And
Baxter
Baxter County Republican Committee meets the last Tuesday each month.
which is the
24th.
24th.
And
Okay.
that's at 6 p.m. at the VFW in Mountain Home. 6 p.m., correct?
6 p.m. And I would highly encourage. We're gradually gaining numbers of people that from in the ages of 18 to 40 that are interested in rejuvenating and reestablishing the Young Republicans chapter up here in Baxter County. So, if you're 18 to 40 and you're interested in becoming a member of the Baxter
you.
County Young Republicans, make sure you're there at the committee meeting next Tuesday at 5:30, and I'll be giving you all the information.
I've been handed the list. Quorum Court, first Tuesday, 5 each month, 5:30 p.m. at the Baxter County Courthouse. City Council, first and third Thursday, 5 p.m., City Hall. City Planning Committee, second Monday each month, 1 p.m. at City Hall. County Planning Committee, second Tuesday, 11 a.m., Baxter County Courthouse. A&P, which is Advertising and Promotion, third Thursday, 3 p.m., City Hall. School Board, third Thursday, 6 p.m. And that's it. Baxter County Republican Committee, last Tuesday each month, 6 p.m., VFW. And we will be back here 1 week from tonight.
So
Thank
for
you for
the-
joining us.
Yeah, and from the folks at Mountain Home Heat and Air and the Baxter County Republican Committee, our sponsors, we wish you a good night